In his annual message on Eid, Taliban leader Hibatullah Akhundzada has declared that an end to the fighting in Afghanistan is not imminent. The statement has come just before US envoy Zalmay Khalilzad's visit to the region in order to pursue peace negotiation in the war-torn country. Habitullah's statement exactly complements the current situation in Afghanistan, where the terror attacks are only increasing rather than decreasing. Last year, the Taliban had observed a 3-day ceasefire over Eid for the first time since 2001. Considering last year's gesture, this year, Afghan President Ashraf Ghani had proposed a nationwide ceasefire at the start of Ramadan, but the Taliban rejected the offer, and since then, in complete contradiction to its last year's intimation, Taliban has been carrying out incessant attacks in the country, especially during Ramadan. We bring you a report.
The head of the Afghan Taliban, Hibatullah Akhundzada, has pledged to continue fighting until the insurgent group reaches its objectives. In his annual message on Eid al-Fitr, Mullah Hibatullah Akhundzada sought to reassure Afghans that the Taliban wanted an end to decades of conflict and a government that represented all Afghans. But he offered little sign of agreeing to a ceasefire or of opening direct negotiations with the Kabul government, which the Taliban regard as an illegitimate foreign-imposed regime. No one should expect us to pour cold water on the heated battlefronts of jihad or forget our 40-year sacrifices before reaching our objectives, he said in the message, adding that the Taliban aimed for an end to the occupation and establishment of an Islamic system.
It is very evident that Taliban is not willing to concede any space to anybody else other than the Taliban in Afghanistan. They want total control of Afghanistan with them. They are not ready to negotiate with the government because they feel that the government is a puppet of the Western powers. They have opened negotiation channels with the US diplomats. Also, recently a meeting was held in Moscow of intra-Afghan groups. But on all these talks, the Taliban representatives have been insisting that they want complete control of Afghanistan and they do not want any interference.
While Hibatullah's message is not really pleasing for the war-torn country, a separate round of talks in Moscow seems to be bringing little good news for the people of Afghanistan. As part of peace negotiations, a Taliban delegation recently met a group of senior Afghan politicians in Moscow, insisting that international forces must leave Afghanistan for peace to be agreed amid gathering diplomatic efforts to end the 18-year war. The delegation, led by Chief Taliban negotiator Mullah Baradar Akhund, met politicians, including senior regional leaders and candidates, challenging President Ashraf Ghani in this year's presidential election. Meetings between the Taliban delegation and political figures not formally associated with the government have been seen as a way of preparing the way for full negotiations later. But those contacts are regarded with deep suspicion by many Afghan officials who see them as undermining the legitimacy of the government while reinforcing the position of the Taliban.
They want a free run in Afghanistan. They want the entire Afghanistan to themselves. They do not want any opposition. They do not want any resistance. They do not like the government forces. They do not like the Afghan army. They want to control Afghanistan through the Taliban and the Taliban fighters. Now, US has made it very clear that US will leave Afghanistan if Taliban gives an assurance that Afghanistan will not be used for the purpose of terrorism. Its soil will not be used. The Taliban are not willing to give. Their intentions are obvious. Similarly, if the forces leave high and dry in between the Afghan, they leave the Afghan government high and dry, and the Americans leave, and the international forces leave, the about 20,000 of which are left in Afghanistan, they leave that, then naturally the way is cleared for the Talibans, and Talibans will have their way, and they will then, the Afghanistan will return to the era where everybody was dreading the Taliban rule.
Hibatullah's call for fight seems to have put Taliban insurgents on immediate action. A magnetic bomb blew up a bus carrying government employees in Afghan capital on killing at least 5 people and wounding 10 in a ball of flame.
ما هم اینجا استگاه ماست همیشه هم اینجا استاد میکنیم هم استاد که یک دفعه غرام بسیار صدای شتی آمده موتر من نفرم بود گفتم تا شوی که بریم این زخمی‌ها را ورداریم تیزی کده خود بالاخره یک دو تا عسکرم در اینجا پیچی شد نماند ما را.
The explosion, the latest in a series of bomb blasts to hit Kabul in recent days, came with the city under the tight security for Eid al-Fitr. While series of terror attacks in Afghanistan continue to disrupt the lives of common people, representatives from Taliban have been talking with US diplomats for months about withdrawing more than 20,000 US and NATO coalition troops in exchange for guarantees that Afghanistan will not be used as a base for terror attacks.